you go, you mute until you need to say something, because it seems like every call I'm on right now, there's like 4 people who don't know how that works. And, it's like somebody's like, I don't know, doing it from their backyard, but there's a fire truck going by and things just get weird. And,
oh, it gets super weird. So I've started making it so I have everybody muted and they cannot unmute themselves. So I have to unmute them. So we're going to walk through our interview, and then whoever has questions, whoever has the best questions, they're going to chat me questions, and whoever has the best questions will be able to, I'm going to unmute them and they'll be able to ask you stuff.
You have entirely too much control. You have entirely too much control, Adam.
I'm okay with it.
Okay. I'm sure you do. I respect it.
So we're going to get going, guys. I want to thank everybody for hopping on today. Welcome to our Lockdown Learning interview for May 4th. I'm not a Star Wars guy, but apparently it's International Star Wars Day, so may the 4th be with you. Live and in person today, we're going to be interviewing my good friend, Dixon Dedman. Dixon is the founder of Kentucky Owl Bourbon, is a proprietor of the Beaumont Inn in Harrodsburg, Kentucky, which is a award-winning, over 100-year-old bed and breakfast, beautiful spot up in Kentucky. Family business, and he's going to tell you a little bit about that. But I had the opportunity to meet Dixon, I think about 5.5 years ago, through some mutual friends. For most of you guys know, when I got into whiskey, I went down a big rabbit hole and started collecting and going to Kentucky a few times a year, and had an opportunity to hang out with this guy up there a few times and go do some barrel selections together. And over those couple of times, we've had an opportunity to become friends, and I've had a chance to learn about his business, his family, his story, and it's one that inspires me, and I think it will inspire you guys as well. This is a guy who has killer work ethic, has built a brand, and continues to grind like crazy. And so, Dixon, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Listen, I feel very honored that you would think to invite me to this, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity.
So first question is, what's the bar behind you? What's the photograph?
Yeah, so this is when I've shot a few of these things here lately, this bar, lucky enough, seems to be it's got the best signal. So we actually have 3 restaurants on the property here at the inn, and one of them is called the Owl's Nest. And so it's a little kind of English pub style bar, and it's very, I feel very fortunate that the Wi-Fi signal is the best in a bar. It seems to suit me, so.
Hey, it's your business, right?
Right.
I mean, I think there's a lot of guys in this call who would be happy that if part of their job description was tasting through hundreds of whiskeys to figure out which one is the best.
Well, it's research and development. It's tough sledding, but you got it. Something with it.
All right, so tell us a little bit about you. I know the Beaumont is a family business, but I want to hear about your upbringing, how you were raised a little bit, and how you ended up in the family business, and what inspired you to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to think about or to talk about now, because it was just normal, but which is not necessarily normal at all. But the way I grew up, I'm the 5th generation of my family to operate the Beaumont Inn here. We've and the building I'm in, my family has actually been in this building since the 1870s. This was a building. It was built as a college, a women's college here in central Kentucky. I'm about 30 miles south of Lexington. So right in kind of Horace, 4 Roses, Wild Turkey, they're both 15 minutes from me. So we're kind of right there in central Kentucky. But this was it was a finishing school, a college for women, and a lot of the women families, wealthy families from the deep South, would send their daughters up here to go to school, to get them, out of seasons with fever and this, that, and the other. And long story short, the school started taking day students, local students, and my great-great-grandmother is actually an 1880 graduate of this school. She came back and taught, was involved, and then the school closed when women started going to public school. And so with her husband, she bought the building, not knowing what she was going to do with it. And she bought it in 1917 and 1919. She was renting rooms and cooking for everybody and bringing in people, and she was a fully operational inn. And so last year, 2019, we celebrated our 100th anniversary. I grew up, we had dinner at home, but a lot of times our family dinners were here, or it is at the dining room table in the restaurants with my grandparents. I started washing dishes when I was 8 years old on Thanksgiving Day. I was taking the clean dishes out of the dish machine and putting them away. And it's, it's just kind of funny because it was kind of ingrained in you from a very early age, that real sense of history, that sense of tradition, and it was much later in my life before I realized how important it was to or the type of legacy that I was trying to not screw up, I guess. But it was a fun way to grow up, but also a very interesting way to grow up, I guess. Not a bad, I don't mean to say a bad thing, but.
So you're fifth generation prior to the end. What goes into the day-to-day operations of running it?
Today or now, or as my parents have retired, I mean, I feel like I have a handful of, and this is all changed in the last several years, but it's small business. It's small business. It's when things flare up, you don't say send that to HR or send that to operations, or this is sometimes I feel like I'm a fireman. I just come in and I put out fires all day long, and it's a lot of that. It's a lot of kind of trying to, we don't have some team of whatever. There's no board. You kind of you do what you have to do, and that's the other thing about it is when the cook calls in sick, you're the cook. When the guest is wants something that is out of everybody says, what do we do? It's like, well, I'll go do it. That's kind of what you do.
And that's the mindset of being an entrepreneur and a small business owner, because a lot of people on this call have either run a small business or they're working towards that. And even the people who are watching, a lot of the people who tune in to our interviews on YouTube or Instagram or IGTV or any of that stuff, people are looking to build businesses for themselves. And I think there's a lot of flash and a lot of this idea of entrepreneur life, people taking a lot of photos next to somebody else's McLaren. But when you get down to the nitty gritty of what it means to actually run a business, it's a little different. So what I think you're best known for, obviously you're known for the Beaumont, but you're known for reintroducing the Kentucky Owl brand bourbon and rye whiskey a few years back. And it's something that was started by your grandfather. So I was hoping you would share the story of where that started and how you made the decision to revamp it and kind of bring it back to life.
But it's kind of, it's a cool story. It's actually, it was actually started by my great-great-grandfather. So on a different side, my great-great-grandfather was 6 years old when both his parents passed away, and he was adopted by his uncle. And his uncle was a judge in Anderson County, Kentucky. That's the county north of here. But he was also a distiller. He owned 3 distilleries. the biggest of which was called Cedar Brook Distillery. And so my great great grandfather, raised by his uncle, was married in 1876, and in 1876, as a wedding gift, his adopted father gave him the land and the funds to create his own distillery. And so, just south of Anderson County into Mercer County, on the banks of the Kentucky River, he had about 30 acres. And by 1879, he was fully operational with the CM Dedman distillery. And the flagship product out of the CM Dedman distillery was Kentucky Owl. And so he, and then with his son, they operated the CM Dedman distillery until about 1916, 1917, when they were forced to shut down due to prohibition. And there are a lot of distilleries in Kentucky today. There were a lot of distilleries in Kentucky prior to prohibition, small distilleries. And so one of the things that happened with my family distillery is they actually came, they confiscated all the inventory, took upwards of 250,000 gallons of his whiskey, put it on barges, and said, this is going into government controlled warehouses. Don't worry, it's all good. We're going to take care of it. And in reality, it was all taken and sold on the black market through speakeasies, through, up the Northeast, Midwest. About 2 years after they had confiscated everything, my family received notice that, unfortunately, these warehouses have mysteriously burned. We're real sorry for your loss. Nothing was insured, and so my family actually spent about 15 years in litigation with the federal government and never received a dime for all that liquid that was lost. And that was really the end of my family's history in the distilling business. And post prohibition, they chose not to get back in the game, so to speak. And incidentally, we were DSP 16 pre-prohibition, and so post-prohibition, that number was sent over to what became a very, very famous distillery called Stitzel Weller. So we have a little tie with my friends over there. But my family always owned that property and still owns that property today. And in the early 90s, my dad's sister was diagnosed with cancer, and she wanted to figure out a way to start bringing everybody together. And so they decided to go down as a family, and with some help, build a cabin on the site where that distillery once existed. And so when I'm like 10, 11 years old, we start doing all our family gatherings down there at this distillery site. And we're climbing around and finding old bottles and where they, kind of vat, like pieces of vats that they would use to cook. I mean, it's just kind of amazing to, we'd walk, and we had the line drawing of where things were. And so we figure out, like, this is, where they ran the water line from the spring. And it just became this kind of really cool thing, and something that I really got excited about. And later in life, as I came back to the inn, this was actually still a dry county that I lived in. I was graduated college, went to college in South Carolina, came back here. We were dry county. Legislation changed, and it allowed us to, at the end, to serve alcohol by the drink. And so all of a sudden, we saw this huge increase in bourbon travelers, and the trail visits started to pick up, and so we created one of the bars here, and I really curated this. At the time, it's probably top 5 whiskey list in the state. Started doing these private tastings and really got much further into it than I probably should have. But it was kind of the development of what we were doing with bourbon here at the inn, and kind of my fondness and fascination with what had a significant part of my family history with bourbon that kind of inspired me to to try to figure this thing out again and really make a run at it.
So there had to be an emotional tie to growing up on that land. And I mean, kids nowadays, if you're in a city like Dallas or Atlanta, you got to keep an eye on where your kids ride bikes. But if you're growing up on the banks of the Kentucky River, it's a little different. There's a lot of freedom growing up there, and it had to be a pretty cool experience, almost like treasure hunting, huh?
No, it was super cool, and my parents, they'd drop us off down there on a Friday afternoon and come pick us up on Sunday, and there's no doubt I learned to drink bourbon down there at a much younger age than I'd been in front of my mother or something like that. But it was really cool, and I remember there's a great line. My grandfather used to always say, when he won the lottery. It wasn't going to be if, it was going to be when he won the lottery. The first thing he was going to do was going to be buy a limousine. The second thing he was going to do was to resurrect the family brand. And I remember hearing that very early on, so yeah, it was kind of one of those things that was, I don't know. I guess it was kind of growing in me for a long time, and kind of a part of and probably why I took it as seriously as I did or as I do. But that connection goes back a long way.
So when did you officially launch Batch 1 Kentucky Owl Bourbon? When was it bottles?
It was 2014. We started kicking tires in about 2010, but September of 2014 was release one of Kentucky Owl.
So if we think about it, you started hearing your grandfather talk about this in the early 1990s in your teenage years, right? Or pre-teenage years, 10, 11 years old. And you started getting the idea of really kicking it into action in around 2010. And it took about 4 years to get everything in place and put it all together. Talk about what happened once the brand started to catch on a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was, one of the things that we did, I knew that there was an opportunity. There was an opportunity, but it was very important to me to not only, the story is there. We have this, I've got the history, I got the story, I got all that stuff. But I wanted to take a very, everything that I knew about the industry and what the things that I think sold or had promise or had opportunity, and learn from that. So I wanted to create a model that was unique, that was something that Kentucky Owl was this. We were twice barreled, blends of different distillates and things that other people were not doing. And I felt like that would we had a good story, and we were doing something unique and creating a product that was that was not large large production and whatever. So we roll it out there and we kind of talk about it, social media channels. And we weren't spending money we didn't have any money to spend on advertising or anything like that.
And the first release was what, 2,500 bottles or something?
No. I mean, that's what the label said, because that's a whole nother story. There's only about 1,100 bottles in the first release.
Wow. Okay.
We were given some bad info that there would be a whole lot of great breakage and the labels would peel off, and so they're like, you need to write a whole bunch more labels than you're going to use because they're going to get torn up. And so we wrote way more than we should have, and there's about 1,100 in 1,150 in batch number one in total. And it was crazy because as soon as we put it out there, to be completely honest, I was like, I wish I'd never done this. I wish I had never done this. I mean, the people, the haters and the negativity came out of the woodwork. I mean, people were coming at us like, I mean, it really bothered me to the point that I put my family in the car and rented a beach house down in South Carolina and was like, I'm going down. We went down there. I turned off my phone and my computer for 3 days. And was like, I can't deal with this.
So it wasn't all love and unicorns and sparkles when you started this thing out.
No, it's terrible. But then here's what I realized. What I figured out was that, a lot of the people that were being so awful were just reading about it online and coming at me, and I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to break the law. Okay. Just up front. But I was like, all these people that have so much to say, I was like, I'm going to send them a note and I'm going to say, send me your address. Just send me your address. And I started shipping out 2-ounce samples of batch 1. I probably sent 75 samples of batch 1 to these people who whiskey authorities, behind their computer keyboard in their mother's basement or whatever. And I was left and right. And, I wish like hell I'd kept screenshots and stuff of the notes I got back that said, hey, my bad, man, this is actually really good, or this is super cool, or now I'm a fan. It's like, I didn't know your whole story, but this is, it's great to know that there really is a real person. We thought you were, whose name is Dixon Dedman anyway? We thought that was made up. I mean, it was on and on and on and on, which was about, and somewhere, I don't know, 2 months after that first release was when I received notification that we won that Made in the South award from Garden and Gun magazine. And, all of a sudden, I mean, it was a total 180, but yeah, early on, I was like, I don't know why I don't know what I did this to myself.
I remember talking to you around that time. It was right when we met, and we were talking about, because in our business, it's interesting because we hire a lot of people and we train people. Everybody starts working at entry level, and it's not sexy at the beginning. And there's a lot of online haters. And what's interesting is, if you read the reviews, there's some sites out there that are interesting. I've gone to battle with companies like Glassdoor and Indeed, where these aren't whiskey advocates or whatever. These aren't people writing a review about a brand. They're platforms where somebody who's completely unvetted can write whatever the hell they want to about you with absolutely no repercussions or stating their name. So people can go online and say whatever they want to, and you're right, it's people hiding behind their keyboards in their mom's basement. And it's interesting because let's fast forward a little bit. You guys won the award from Garden and Gun. I remember when you came out with batch 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you got approached by a pretty big company with interest in the brand. Can you talk about that brand exchange at all?
Yeah, I mean, that was and just to your previous point, the only thing was, it was bad. The Kentucky Owl and whiskey people are bad. I think it's like with everything. It's like the people who, everybody's an authority on everything anymore. Everybody is, and the hotel, the restaurant side, I mean, if people now travel, and I mean, I guess I'm guilty of it. I don't know, but they expect, their expectations are, if to become a celebrity on Instagram because of what they post or whatever, and I mean, it's amazing what people will write about, either to try to get a discount or to try to get, I mean, it's really funny how everybody, it's like, I'm going to change your life with my, because everybody now is a travel expert, or like, it's like with whiskey, you have the people who are just so loud and they're the minority and nobody wants to be around them or whatever. But it exists in all the platforms that I seem to be in, as you do, and it's
Oh,
annoying.
yeah.
But
Yeah, everybody's their expert. I don't know if you ever saw the South Park episode about Yelp, but it might be worth watching being in your industry.
Well,
So,
I got, and that wasn't the first time. We had been approached several times, and nothing felt right to me. And I'm not, I'm not at the time that really felt right to me. There was, an opportunity to, but yeah, we got we were shown some interest. We like what you're doing. We like to get involved, and there were a lot of discussions about how that would work and how that would how that would develop. But there were times before where people came in and said, hey, we want the whole thing, and y'all go away, or different things like that. This one at the time felt, it made sense, and there was an opportunity to take the brand from Kentucky only to nationwide, and potentially further with some international markets. They were very interested in creating a distillery and an experience to showcase the history and talk about the the brand and how the kind of the unique approach that we've created. I talk a lot of times with people about, for me, I work in the food business and whiskey business, and I'm not really good about I can't pick things apart, I know what tastes good and what doesn't. I know when it tastes good, and it's pretty simple to me. And that opportunity to stay on with the brand, to continue, I still to this day, with their, with that relationship, I've done batch 7, batch 8, batch 9. I've done now 4 bottlings of rye. I've done 2 rounds of the confiscated, and this new product we're launching, which is kind of crazy, was called Dry State. But no one, I am the only person that's touched that whiskey. I don't have a sensory panel that has to, the opportunity to grow the brand, but to still be the only one touching, the blends, really, really excited me. And so some of the other opportunities that we had prior to that were holding out for something that it didn't taste good to me, but that one seemed to work,
and it just didn't feel right. So you were really driven by your values and your beliefs. You were offered some pretty decent cash for something that you had built to walk away, but it seems like you held what it meant to you at a level where that didn't feel right.
You're exactly right. I mean, I still, I still am very attached to the brand, and the opportunity to really not have to turn it over to someone was something very appealing to me, because it's just, I mean, there's still very much, I mean, it's just like with the inn. It's just like every day I walk into the inn and I push open that door, and I know that my family's been pushing open that front door since the 1870s. And and it's there's financially, is one thing, but kind of the peace of mind and and kind of just to know that you built something, that brand built something, and then, I still am the caretaker of that brand is very important to me.
I love that. So you've got the Beaumont Inn. You're doing everything you do with Kentucky Owl. You're married. You have kids. You stay in shape. You run marathons. And one of the things that I think, I'm not sure if it's marathon or half. You did a marathon last year, didn't you?
I did the New York City Marathon in November.
So I'm looking at all this, and I hear a lot of people, especially young people, who tell me I just don't have time. And I've been a big proponent that discipline creates time. I'm curious what you do to keep the balance and to fulfill the roles that you fulfill, because I watch you with your wife and your kids and your business, and you're there for everybody, and you still take time to do some fun stuff for you, and you still take time to stay in shape. So what advice do you have with that?
Well, I think I probably don't have it. I appreciate the compliment. I'm not sure I've got it quite as figured out as you may make it seem, but I guess a couple things. The marathon was just kind of a fun thing to say, but the trying to stay in shape, running. I mean, that is the one time where I get a little. I figure a lot of stuff out when I can just get 45 minutes or so of not no interruption because somebody needs to be wiped or this, that, or the other.
Hopefully you mean your kids, not your customers.
Well, sometimes I feel like that's one and the same. It's been a crazy, there were times where I was going to do like a market visit somewhere, and I would leave my house at 3:30 in the morning to drive an hour and a half to Louisville to get on a 6 a.m. flight out. But I would come by the inn and pull the files off the printer on a Monday morning. And on my flight, wherever I was going, I'm like keying in payroll for Beaumont Inn while I was flying to Dallas to do a market visit or something like that. And,
Kentucky Owl.
What's that? Right.
For Kentucky Owl, right.
I mean, it's been a hard transition, but it's always, I do think growing up in this business and growing up as a small business owner and growing up watching my parents and going through all that stuff, if you count hours, or whatever, or think that you have a certain work week, or you think that you have, these are the things that I do, and if you do that, you're going to be miserable. And understanding that, I learned very early on, and my grandfather said that, and my father said that, this is much more of a way of life than it is a job or an occupation. And I think that's really helped me to understand, not only that, I'm not sitting there going, okay, I've put in 40 hours this week, I'm done, but also to make the most of the things, the time that I have, and also try to maximize my productivity, and then family my family is the most important thing to me in the world, and I will never ever let that suffer. And if that means the inn, or if that means Kentucky Owl or whatever, so I'm kind of set in in that, and I don't always have it figured out, and it's tough. I did several years ago, I was on an airplane and I was reading something this lady was writing in her journal. I was reading over her shoulder. But it said that the the things that you want to do the least, how did she say it? The things that you want to do the least are typically the things you try to do last. And it, you know, and I was reading, so I kind of looked that up, and it was from some book, but it was basically like, you know, for time management, you know, purposes, you know, I started looking at my list. I journal everything. I make a, you know, I have notebooks I carry with me, and, you know, but I started looking at the things that were always, you know, I would carry from one day to the next, and one day to the next, and one day to the next. And those were just things I didn't want to do. So I would fill up, you know, my time with other stuff so that I didn't, you know, and I finally decided that, you know, I was going to start prioritizing things by what I wanted to do least, and then knock them out first. And in doing so, you know, once I got those things out of my way, I felt like I wasn't creating stuff to fill my time. I actually was, you know, I had more time. And you know, so there's only so many hours in a day, and there's only so, you know, and I really try to maximize everything and get through it. And I have a wonderful team, you know, around me, and support system, and, you know, so I'm fortunate with that. But sorry, that was probably.
No, that's awesome. That's great. And I like that answer too. It's habit 3 from 7 habits of highly effective people is you put first things first. And Brian Tracy calls it eating the frog. And eating the frog. If you know to stay alive, you have to eat one frog a day. You can either sit and let it stare at you all day, or you just choke the thing down, get it over with, and get to work, right? So I'm gonna open it up for, we've got some questions. Swania from Fort Worth, or Dallas, I guess, Texas. You there?
Yes. Okay. So thank you for being with us today, first of all. So a lot of people are very passionate about their jobs and businesses because they've worked through it, like maybe through tear or sweat. Now, what makes and keeps you passionate about running your family business, which is family owned, and continue passing it to future generations?
I think I can answer that probably in 2 ways. One is, you know, I in 2015, we received probably the highest recognition we could ever receive. I'm talking about the Inn. We were recognized by the James Beard Foundation with an America's Classic Award. So they've only recognized a handful of those in the 25 years of the foundation. And I remember we fought about it, but I went on stage, and there's, you know, 2,500 people, and and every famous chef that you can think of is sitting there. And I had thought a lot about what I was going to try to say or get through or whatever. And then I realized that, you know, I thought, you know, while I'm very happy to be up here and take, you know, accept this, there, you know, my great grandmother and her husband, my great grandmother and her husband, my grandparents, my mom, dad, you know, there's a lot more than me that is in Beaumont Inn. Something like 7, 8, you know, upwards of to 10 plus thousand people have been employed by this company over time. It is important to me because when I come in and when I leave, I know that I'm another part of preserving something that so many people have worked so hard to create. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then, you know, I have always been wired I want to be the best. I want to, I want to make the best whiskey. I want to make the best fried chicken. I want to make the best biscuits in the morning. I want to be, I want the end to be the best. I want, we are what we are. We're not some 3 Michelin star television.
I'm sharing this post.
Oh, okay.
So every Saturday morning, I'm tweaking my biscuit recipe until I create the world's most delicious biscuit. And today I came very close.
Yeah, those are good. But I with everything, I think one, you have to understand, who you are and where you came from. You have to understand, I'm working on a book and this is part of it, but who you are, where you came from, and then what you aspire to be. Directions don't get you anywhere unless you understand what point A is and what point B is. And for me, I want, I want our hospitality to be unmatched. I want our service to be, unmatched. And I just, I want, when people think, and that's what drives me every day.
I love that. That being the best for the sake of being the best. We have Khalid from Lexington.
How's it going, Dixon?
Local, what's up?
Nothing much. Just wanted to ask, what advice would you give to business owners who are trying to build their brand?
I'm probably not the best at telling you how to build your brand if you're talking in terms of followers on Instagram or whatever. But I can tell you that, I'll tell you a story. I was in New York, and this I related this story to this young man. He came, he asked me, he was like, what, how do I get where you are? And I was like, look, man, I don't know what to tell you. I was like, here's one thing I remember from growing up. I was outside, I was working in the yard at the inn. I was with the yard crew, and weed eating or whatever. And my grandmother, was walking towards the inn. And I was like, and I walked over and I said, hey, how are you? And, hugged her or whatever. And then, and then went back to my thing. And she said, Dixon, come here for a second. Let me show you something. And I was like, yes, ma'am. And she said, you see that piece of trash right over there? And I said, yeah. She said, watch this. And she goes over and she picks it up. And she said, do you see what I did there? And I said, what's that? She said, well, I picked up that trash. And I said, yes, ma'am, I got it. And she said, well, now you know how to do that. So I don't ever have to show you how to do that again. If you're out here and your job is to work on the grounds, picking up trash is part of the grounds. And so now you've been shown how to do that, and I don't have to ask you to do that again. And so I was taught this, fast forward, I'm in New York, this guy asked me a question. He's like, what do I, and I said, well, here's what advice I'll give you. You make yourself stand out. You make yourself unique. People follow leadership. People follow people who aren't afraid to get dirty. People follow people who aren't afraid to work hard. And I was like, just you think about walking down the hallway in your office and you think about a piece of trash, and this trash is getting bounced around and all this stuff, and nobody wants to pick it up because everybody's like, where's the janitor? Where's the, somebody, the cleaning lady will get that stuff. I said, push somebody out of the way and you pick up that piece of trash and you put it in the trash can. And everybody that sees you do that, that's going to resonate with them. Be unique in your effort to get dirty, to work hard, and to take the extra step instead of waiting on somebody else to do it. You show everybody that not only do you know how to do this, but you don't have to be asked to do this ever again. And That's how people follow you. That's how people get in line behind you. That's how people champion your cause. And that's how people will help you with what you're doing.
I love that. That's for me, that's the highlight right there. I mean, I love hearing that from you in the sense of you just gotta, that's what makes a real leader unique, is they're willing to do the work. They're willing to do the other stuff that other people aren't willing to do. So we may have time for one more question towards the end here, but I'm going to share my screen for a second. You started an interesting series on your social media here recently. Talk to me about Whiskey in a Box.
Whiskey in a Box was, I'm not even sure how that happened. I just was thinking, okay, this is fun. This might be fun. I'm gonna and to try to get some people engaged and try to. I do a lot of tastings at the end, so I really thought that was, an opportunity to keep that going or something. And I did like the first one, and it absolutely blew up. I mean, it was crazy, the response, and then turned it into a challenge, and then the challenge went wild. There's like some famous wrestler that's challenged me to do it. We're WWE guy. We're doing it at 4:00 this afternoon. A virtual Whiskey in a Box, but it's just, honestly, it's been something that's kind of taken my mind off of, it's kind of fun to be like, oh, I'm about to pull my hair out trying to figure all this stuff out. I'm going to go do a Whiskey in a Box video or whatever.
So how do you do? You have somebody from the end will pour you something, hide it, or somebody sends you something?
Both. Yeah. So it started with, when I had this, just a box. Yeah. And they would go down. There's probably 400 whiskeys here at the end, and they go and they pour some in a glass, and then put the bottle underneath this box. And I would then video myself kind of tasting it, smelling it, talk about what I think it might be. I'd make a guess, and then I would lift up the box and find out just how wrong I was. Or
how's your success rate been on it so far?
Oh, terrible. Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't help that now the samples that are coming in are like from distilleries that I've never heard of. And I mean, people, it's
somebody's private barrel in the back of their house.
No, absolutely.
Collecting rainwater for 3 years.
One I got one, and I was like, I couldn't even post it because it was like, yeah, that's a blend I created of these 4 different things. I was like, okay.
I can't post that. All right. So my friend Clinton Dugan, who is my next door neighbor, and I were talking over the fence from 6 feet away a couple of weeks ago. And he's like, you and Dixon should do one of these together. I'm like, that's a great idea. So I went to a source, my very good friend and yours, Jason Young, who owns VFG Wealth Management in Lexington, Kentucky, hand wrote a little note to each of us, podcast sample info. You'll notice it is taped shut. And it came with a little sample like that. And it is in a glass right there. And so we're going to say cheers and see how wrong we can be. And the idea is, a lot of people think that they can nail a whiskey right out just by smelling it or something. Like I pick up all these tasting notes, and I have 2 tasting notes. It's either good or bad. So let's see if we agree on this one.
Well, when I've been doing it, and it's funny because I opened it up to all whiskeys. So, there was a couple, I was like, that's, as we mentioned earlier, Scott, but, I try to figure out, is it rye whiskey? Is it bourbon? Is it, this, that, the other? What are the notes? Is it sweet? Is it spicy? Is it, and I still think, you can, at least 50% of it, identifying what it is, comes from smelling. And I mean, I don't know your thoughts on this. Is old. This is vintage. This is something.
Yeah. It's National Distiller, something from the 70s, I think.
Yeah, this is. It's not an old granddad.
I was thinking Old Taylor or Old Granddad, but I couldn't tell which one.
I think it's heavier than Old Taylor. I think it's got more. It's definitely old. Yeah.
It's funky.
Yeah. But it's not. I don't think it's. I think it's got to be. It's something like that. The color. There's it's not old turkey, and I don't think it's got that funk from that's been in like a ceramic decanter. Like that's, those
No,
things.
it doesn't taste like the chestnut or anything like
Right,
that.
right.
It's dark, but not crazy dark, and it's not any more than 100 proof. So for anybody who's watching, this is how we nerd out in whiskey land.
Yeah, I mean that's what I would say. Some type of bottled and bond, old granddad from the 70s, 80s, something like that.
I am right with you. I was thinking national distillers. So you guys we're ready to open?
Sure.
This sample is from a bottled and bond old granddad decanter barreled in spring of 1949 and bottled in the fall of 1954. Hope you
Okay,
enjoy it.
so I was off by 20 years.
Off by 20 years, but same recipe, right? So didn't do too bad. So we
Yeah,
have a question.
This was a softball. I think he softballed us. I mean, this is hard not to.
It's hard not to notice that butterscotch, but JY, cheers if you're watching. Thank you.
For sure.
And it's not often you get to drink a whiskey from before your parents were born. So at least for me, so that's pretty cool. So somebody asked, which wrestler is it that you're doing the tasting with? Are you allowed to say?
Yeah. His wrestling name it's Aiden English.
I'm watching some faces, so clearly people know who that is. I haven't watched wrestling in a long time.
He's huge, and he's like, there's a feature on him in Whiskey Advocate this month about his whiskey collection and his affinity for whiskey. I think he did something. He did like a live throwdown with Fred Minnick on Friday night or something like that. I mean, he's big into it. So I sent him a blind sample. He sent me a blind sample.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And we do have one more question. When you're not drinking Kentucky Owl, what's your go-to? What do you reach for on a day-to-day basis?
I will tell you, I drink. I'm a big Four Roses guy, as you know, Adam, but I honestly am to the point. I enjoy the whiskey in the box. I enjoy tasting stuff. I don't go home and pour a bourbon anymore. I drink, I taste it and I'm like, it's too much like work. I mean, I working through samples and building blends and approving this and approving that and going through all that stuff. I go home and we talk about what bottle of wine we're going to open and I tell you, believe it or not, I've become a huge gin and tonic snob because I think it's as far removed from bourbon as, it's like they don't even it's that change of pace, I guess.
You got to get the good tonic water. None of that sweat stuff, though.
Right.
Fever tree all the way. So final piece of advice. First thing first, I really appreciate your time. We're going to unmute here and clap in a minute. But you got a lot of young people on this call, people who are going through something that's clearly a generation-defining moment. Piece of advice for people working to build businesses in this crazy time.
Yeah, I talk to my team about this a lot, and the N team, and I think my word and something I'm really passionate about is being disruptive, and disruption is something that oftentimes you think of as like something was disruptive and it created a negative experience. That's the way we think of disruption. But I talk to our team all the time about disruptive hospitality and disrupting people's expectations by going above and beyond what they expect. And disrupting, people are going to come in and they expect this, and if they get it, they're happy. But if you can disrupt their expectations, if you can disrupt what's happening with them by taking it to another level, then you've completely you've completely changed their experience, and they become advocates for what you're doing. And that's why I told you, we want to be the best, But when you know that somebody wants this or is celebrating this or whatever, if you can take that one step further, if you can disrupt their what they expect by taking it one step further, that's how people become advocates for what you're doing, and that's how you build that base. And so I was thinking a lot about that. I was talking to people about that. Is how you how disruptive doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can actually be a positive thing. And so the experience that people don't expect, just it can really set you apart from anybody else that your competition. And that's what I talk to our team about all the time, is seeing a need, and before somebody has to ask for it, you present it, you have it there, you make it available to them, and their expectation of service is disrupted in a positive way because of that. And that's my advice would be, try to think of ways to be disruptive in whatever arena you're working in, but do that in a obviously positively.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're busy. I'm going to unmute everybody so we can see you off properly. Thanks, Dixon.
Thank you.
What about the whiskey or the bourbon?